In the heart of Dallas, a poor mechanic's dream takes life. His little girl, Sophie, once bound by a broken chair, now spins freely under the sunlight in a wheelchair he built with his own hands. Her laughter fills the air, her father's eyes glisten with pride, and a wealthy stranger stops in awe, witnessing a miracle born from love and resilience start. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get started. In Dallas, Texas, the days always seemed longer for Ethan Miller. He was only 34 but looked older, with tired eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years spent under the hood of cars. His small garage job barely kept the lights on at home, but he never complained. Every paycheck went straight to rent, food, and medicine for his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. Raising her alone since his wife passed away had never been easy, but Ethan loved Sophie more than life itself. She was his reason for pushing through each exhausting day. Sophie had been born with a condition that left her unable to walk. From the moment she was old enough to sit upright, a wheelchair became her companion. Ethan had once managed to buy her a second-hand chair from a thrift shop, but now it was falling apart. Its wheels squeaked loudly, the brakes didn't hold, and the torn seat left Sophie uncomfortable. Ethan knew she needed a new one, but the cost, thousands of dollars, was impossible for him to imagine. Every time he looked at the price tags online, his chest tightened. One evening, after a long shift at the garage, Ethan came home to find Sophie sitting silently by the window. She watched other children play outside, running through the yard and chasing one another. Her small hands gripped the edge of the window as tears welled in her eyes. "Daddy," she finally whispered, her voice trembling, "why can't I go to the park like other kids?" Those words broke Ethan into pieces. He knelt beside her, hugging her tightly. "One day, sweetheart, I promise," he said, though he didn't know how he could keep that promise. That night, as Sophie slept, Ethan sat in the living room, staring at the broken wheelchair. He ran his rough hands across its bent frame, the rust clinging to his skin. His mind spun with desperation. A new chair was out of reach, but he refused to let Sophie grow up believing she couldn't enjoy the world like other kids. Slowly, a spark of determination ignited inside him. He whispered to himself, "If I can fix cars, why can't I fix this? I'll do it. I'll build her something better." His voice was quiet, but his heart roared with resolve. From that day forward, Ethan's nights belonged not to rest, but to the garage. He stayed after work, scavenging parts others threw away. Broken bicycles, old car seats, even pieces of discarded shopping carts became treasures in his eyes. To others it was junk. To Ethan it was the beginning of hope. He carried the parts home, pushing a cart down the street under the dim glow of streetlights, neighbors watching with puzzled looks. People whispered, wondering why he dragged so much scrap into his small garage. Ethan didn't care. He had a mission. Inside the garage, sparks lit the darkness as he worked. The familiar hum of his welding machine echoed against the walls. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but his hands moved steadily, shaping and reshaping the metal pieces. He took careful measurements, making sure the frame would be sturdy, yet light enough for Sophie. Every screw, every weld, every adjustment carried his love for his daughter. He thought about her smile, her laughter, and the way her eyes lit up whenever she felt even a glimpse of freedom. That thought kept him awake through the long nights. Neighbors often passed by on their way home from late shifts. They could hear the buzz of tools and see the glow through the open garage door. Some shook their heads, whispering that Ethan was wasting his time, that he should just accept what he couldn't afford. Others quietly admired his determination, though they didn't say it aloud. Still, Ethan pressed on. He wasn't just building a wheelchair. He was building Sophie's chance at happiness. His body ached, but his heart refused to give up. At times, frustration overwhelmed him. A wheel wouldn't align, or a joint would snap under pressure. He slammed tools on the table in anger, his chest heavy with doubt. But then he'd remember Sophie's voice. "Daddy, why can't I go to the park like other kids?" That memory always pulled him back. He would take a deep breath, wipe the sweat from his brow, and start again. Nothing mattered more than giving his daughter the freedom she deserved. For Ethan, failure wasn't an option. Weeks passed like this, with Ethan juggling his job during the day and his secret project at night. His co-workers noticed his exhaustion, but when they asked, he simply smiled and said he was fine. He didn't want pity. He didn't want handouts. He wanted to do this with his own hands. Each morning, Sophie would wake up and ask why her dad looked so tired. Ethan would smile and say, "Just working hard." "Sweetheart." He never told her what he was building, wanting to keep it a surprise. As the project neared completion, Ethan carefully painted the frame a bright shade of blue, Sophie's favorite color. He padded the seat with soft fabric he had found at a local donation center. He polished the wheels until they gleamed under the light. Looking at the chair, he felt a lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he felt proud, not because of what it was made from, but because of what it represented. This wasn't just a wheelchair, it was love, sacrifice, and a father's promise fulfilled. Finally, one evening, he rolled the finished chair into their small living room. Sophie's eyes widened as she gasped. "Daddy, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. Ethan knelt beside her, smiling softly. "It's for you, Princess. I built it so you can go to the park, just like other kids." Tears filled Sophie's eyes as she reached out, touching the smooth frame. She could hardly believe it was real. Ethan lifted her gently and placed her in the chair. The moment Sophie sat down, her face lit up with joy. She pushed the wheels and moved forward smoothly, her laughter echoing through the house. She spun in circles, giggling uncontrollably. Ethan stood back, watching, his chest swelling with pride. He wiped a tear from his eye, overwhelmed by the sight of his daughter. So happy. All the sleepless nights, the cuts and bruises, the exhaustion, suddenly, it was all worth it. He hadn't just built a wheelchair. He had rebuilt Sophie's hope. As she continued laughing, Sophie looked at her father and said, "Daddy, this is the best gift ever. Now I can finally go to the park." Ethan knelt, hugging her tightly. "You deserve the world, Sophie," he whispered. In that small garage in Dallas, a poor single dad had done what many thought impossible. He had turned scrap into a miracle, proving that love could create hope even in the hardest of circumstances. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. For weeks, Ethan lived in two worlds. By day, he was a mechanic working long shifts in the small Dallas garage, fixing cars for customers who barely noticed him. By night, he was a father on a mission. Locked in his workshop, surrounded by scattered tools, rusted scraps, and endless determination. His body ached, but his heart was stronger than ever. With each passing night, he poured every ounce of strength into the project. It wasn't just about wheels and frames. It was about giving Sophie something priceless, her freedom, her laughter, her childhood back. The process was far from easy. The first frame he built collapsed under its own weight. The second one wobbled so badly that he almost gave up, throwing his wrench across the room in frustration. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Sophie's, a tearful face by the window, asking why she couldn't play like other kids. That memory was enough to steady his hands again. He wiped his brow, picked up the broken frame, and started over. For Ethan, failure simply wasn't an option. Night after night, sparks illuminated the garage like fireflies dancing in the dark. The loud buzz of welding filled the neighborhood streets long after midnight. Some neighbors shook their heads, whispering to each other that Ethan had lost his mind. "Why is he wasting time on junk?" they asked. Others simply ignored him, but a few silently admired his grit. They saw the tired father dragging home bent bicycles, old shopping carts, and car seats, and they knew he wasn't just building metal. He was building hope. And that kind of work didn't need approval. Ethan became obsessed with details. He reshaped metal frames again and again until they aligned perfectly. He polished old wheels until they shined like new, adjusting spokes and axles so they would glide smoothly across any surface. He cut, bent, and bolted parts with the precision of a craftsman, measuring twice before making a single cut. He tested every joint for strength, leaning his weight on it to be certain it wouldn't fail Sophie. The chair wasn't just a machine, it was a father's heart, forged into steel. His hands bore the proof of his sacrifice. Calluses split open into small cuts, burns dotted his skin, and grease never seemed to wash away. But Ethan hardly noticed. Every ache reminded him of why he was doing this. He imagined Sophie's smile when she'd sit in the chair for the first time. He pictured her moving freely, her laughter echoing in the air. That vision became his fuel, stronger than sleep, stronger than pain, stronger than doubt. The world saw junk, but Ethan saw possibility, and love turned possibility into certainty. The nights blurred into weeks. Sophie often asked why her dad looked so tired every morning, why his eyes seemed heavier than before. Ethan would smile gently, ruffling her hair, and say, "Just working hard for us, sweetheart." She didn't know what he was building, and he wanted to keep it that way. This was more than a project, it was a gift, a surprise that would show her just how far a father's love could go. The secret made his burden lighter, knowing that soon her tears would turn into laughter. As the chair neared completion, Ethan found himself standing back and staring at it in disbelief. The frame was strong, sleek, and balanced. The wheels rolled with grace, not a squeak or wobble in sight. He had padded the seat with fabric he found at a donation center, sewing it carefully with his rough hands. He painted the frame Sophie's favorite color, a bright shade of blue that reminded him of summer skies. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to feel pride not in himself, but in what this chair would mean for his daughter. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Ethan wheeled the finished chair into their small living room. Sophie sat on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes widening as she saw what her father had made. The chair stood gleaming in the sunlight that filtered through the curtains. It didn't look like something from a scrapyard. It looked strong, dependable, almost magical. Sophie's mouth fell open in disbelief. "Daddy, is this really for me?" she whispered, her small voice trembling. Ethan knelt down beside her, his eyes misty. "Yes, sweetheart, I built it for you." He lifted Sophie gently into the chair. The moment her hands gripped the wheels, and she pushed forward, her entire face lit up. The chair glided smoothly across the floor. She spun in circles, laughing so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. "It works, Daddy, it really works," she shouted, her voice filled with pure joy. Ethan stood back, his throat tight, his vision blurred with emotion. Every late night, every cut, every moment of doubt vanished in that instant. Seeing Sophie happy was worth every sacrifice he had made. The sound of Sophie's laughter filled the house, bouncing off the walls like music. She zipped from one corner of the room to the other, spinning and twirling, her giggles louder with every turn. Ethan leaned against the wall, covering his face with his hand as tears escaped his eyes. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but watching his little girl free again broke every barrier. Inside him, he hadn't just built a wheelchair, he had rebuilt his daughter's hope piece by piece, screw by screw, night by night. When Sophie finally stopped, catching her breath, she wheeled herself back to her father and threw her arms around him. "Daddy, this is the best gift ever," she exclaimed, her voice muffled against his chest. Ethan hugged her tightly, holding her as if he never wanted to let go. "You deserve the best, princess," he whispered, his voice breaking. In that moment, all the hardship, the loneliness, the exhaustion faded away. What remained was a bond between father and daughter that no amount of money could ever buy. That night, Sophie insisted on keeping the wheelchair right next to her bed. She refused to let it out of her sight. She kept running her hands across the frame, marveling at the smooth paint, the sturdy wheels, the soft seat. "I can't believe you built this," she whispered before falling asleep, her small hands resting on the armrest. Ethan stood in the doorway watching her drift into dreams with a smile on her face. His heart swelled with pride. He had nothing in this world, no wealth, no luxury, but he had given his daughter the greatest gift of all. Ethan lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He thought about the countless hours he had spent, the moments when he almost gave up, and the quiet voice inside him that told him to keep going. Now it all made sense. He realized that the wheelchair wasn't just a tool for Sophie. It was proof that love could move mountains, proof that determination could turn scrap into miracles. As he closed his eyes, he felt a peace he hadn't known in years. For once, the future didn't seem so dark. The next morning, Sophie begged to take the chair outside. Ethan laughed, telling her to eat breakfast first. She wolfed down her cereal faster than ever, her excitement impossible to contain. When they finally stepped into the sunlight, Sophie rolled across the yard with ease. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, astonished by the transformation. The same people who had once whispered doubts now watched in silence as Sophie's laughter filled the air. Ethan stood behind her, his chest swelling with pride. He had taken the impossible and turned it into reality, all for the sake of his little girl. That day marked the beginning of something greater than Ethan could have imagined. He thought he had only built a chair, but in truth, he had built a story, one that would travel further than he ever expected. Sophie's joy would not stay hidden within their home. Soon, others would see the miracle crafted from a father's love, and their lives would never be the same again. But in that moment, as the sun warmed the Dallas sky, all that mattered was Sophie's smile, brighter than the sun itself, and Ethan's quiet, unshakable pride. One sunny Saturday morning, Ethan finally fulfilled Sophie's dream. With her brand-new wheelchair shining in the light, he took her to the local park. The air smelled of fresh grass, and children's laughter rang through the trees. Sophie wheeled herself down the path, her giggles brighter than the sun. Ethan followed close behind, smiling proudly at every turn she made. For the first time in years, Sophie wasn't sitting on the sidelines. She was part of the world around her. People stopped to watch, struck by the beauty of a little girl's joy. Among the people at the park that day was Olivia Carter, a wealthy businesswoman known throughout Dallas for her success in real estate and philanthropy. She was walking with her assistants when she heard Sophie's laughter. The sound drew her attention, and when she saw the wheelchair, she froze. It wasn't a design she recognized. It looked sturdy yet unique, something crafted with care. Olivia walked closer, curiosity written all over her face. "Excuse me," she said softly, "where did you buy this wheelchair? It looks incredible." Ethan, shy but honest, looked up at her. His worn shirt carried traces of oil from the garage, and his tired eyes contrasted with Olivia's polished elegance. "I didn't buy it," he admitted. "I built it, from scrap." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that silenced everyone around. Olivia blinked, stunned. She glanced at Sophie, then back at Ethan, as if trying to process what she'd just heard. A poor mechanic had created something not only functional, but beautiful, something that gave life back to his daughter. Olivia crouched down to Sophie's level, studying the chair with awe. She ran her hand across the frame, noticing the precision and care put into every detail. This wasn't just a makeshift solution. It was craftsmanship born from love. Sophie beamed proudly. "My daddy built it for me," she said, her voice filled with admiration. Olivia's heart softened instantly. She had attended countless charity events and written checks for causes, but this was different. This was raw human sacrifice turned into a miracle. For the first time in a long while, she felt genuinely moved. She stood up and looked Ethan directly in the eyes. "You built this by yourself?" she asked again, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. Ethan nodded slowly. "I didn't have the money for a new one, but I couldn't let my daughter stay stuck inside, so I used what I had." His humility pierced Olivia's heart. In her world of wealth, people often threw away what they didn't need. Yet here stood a man who turned trash into treasure because he refused to let his little girl lose hope. Without hesitation, Olivia handed Ethan her card. "I want you to come to my foundation office tomorrow," she said firmly. Ethan hesitated, confused by her sudden seriousness. "Mom, I don't know if I belong in places like that," he admitted. Olivia smiled gently. "Trust me, you belong more than anyone I've ever met." Sophie clapped her hands in excitement, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing something wonderful. Ethan tucked the card into his pocket, still unsure what the future held, but hopeful for the first time in years. The next day, Ethan nervously walked into the tall glass building of the Carter Foundation, Sophie by his side in her new chair. The polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers were worlds apart from his tiny garage, and he felt out of place instantly. But when Olivia walked out to greet them, her warm smile melted his fears. She ushered them into her office, where pictures of children's charities lined the walls. "I couldn't stop thinking about your story," she began. "What you did for your daughter is extraordinary, and I think it can help so many more kids." Ethan listened carefully as Olivia laid out her idea. She wanted to sponsor Sophie's education so she could have the brightest future possible. More than that, she wanted to fund a workshop for Ethan, an entire facility where he could build affordable, customized wheelchairs for children in need. Ethan's jaw dropped. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "I'm just a mechanic. I don't have a degree or training in medical equipment." Olivia leaned forward. "You have something more valuable than any degree. You have heart, and that's what these kids need." For a moment, Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He had spent years struggling to provide for Sophie, never imagining life could offer them something bigger than survival. Now this wealthy woman wanted to give him a chance not only to help his daughter, but to change lives. Sophie reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Daddy, you can do it," she whispered, her eyes shining. Her faith in him gave him courage. Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "If this means helping kids like Sophie, then I'll do it. I'll try." Weeks turned into months, and with Olivia's support, Ethan's new workshop came to life. It wasn't fancy at first, but it had tools, materials, and space. Everything he had once dreamed of. Word spread quickly through Dallas about the mechanic who turned scraps into miracles. Families lined up, bringing their children, each with stories of struggle and need. Ethan poured the same love and dedication into every chair as he had for Sophie's. Each one was unique, built to fit the child perfectly. For the first time, he realized he had found his purpose. Sophie became the heart of the workshop. She tested every design, offering feedback in her cheerful way. "This one turns too slow, Daddy," or "This one's really comfy." Her laughter filled the space, reminding everyone why the work mattered. Parents often wept when they saw their children moving freely for the first time. Ethan would quietly step back, letting the joy belong to the families, but inside his heart swelled with pride. He wasn't just building chairs anymore, he was rebuilding lives, piece by piece. Olivia visited often, watching the transformation with amazement. She had invested in countless projects, but none had touched her heart like this one. "You've changed more lives in a few months than some organizations do in years," she told Ethan one afternoon. He shook his head humbly. "I just did what any father would do. I just wanted my little girl to smile." Olivia smiled back, her eyes misty. "And in doing that, you've given countless other children the same chance. That's rare, Ethan. That's extraordinary." Media outlets eventually caught wind of the story. Soon, cameras filled the workshop, reporters eager to share the tale of the single dad mechanic who built miracles out of junk. At first, Ethan was overwhelmed by the attention, but Sophie loved it. She proudly told every reporter, "My daddy is the best." The story spread far beyond Dallas, inspiring people across the country. Donations poured into the foundation, allowing Ethan to expand his work. What had started as one father's desperate act of love had become a movement of hope that reached children everywhere. Despite the new fame, Ethan never changed. He still wore his old boots, still greeted everyone with humility, and still spent long hours in the workshop, perfecting each wheelchair. His only priority was making sure no child ever had to sit at a window crying like Sophie once had. And Sophie, thriving in school thanks to Olivia's sponsorship, grew more confident each day. Together they became a symbol of resilience, a living reminder that even the poorest man, armed with love, could create miracles that stunned the world. Years later, people still remembered the story of Ethan Miller, the poor single dad mechanic who shocked everyone by rebuilding a broken wheelchair. They remembered Olivia Carter, the billionaire, who believed in him when no one else did. But most of all, they remembered Sophie's laughter, the sound that started it all. In the end, it wasn't just about wealth or poverty, success or struggle. It was about love, sacrifice, and the belief that even in the hardest circumstances, hope could be rebuilt. Together, Ethan and Sophie proved that miracles aren't bought, they're made.